Hi everyone, so my topic for From the Field Research Project was on page 257 and it focuses on the invert and multiply technique when you're dividing fractions. So the objective that I chose was after the students complete the Do Now activity and the Voyage to the Treasure activity, which I will show momentarily, students will be able to correctly invert and then multiply the fractions by one another in order to produce the correct quotient. And right down here I have listed the NJSLA code. And right below it is a smaller version of the standard that was listed because there was a short example after, which is apply and extend previous understandings of multiplication and division to divide fractions by fractions. So throughout this activity, I wanted to really emphasize the common misconceptions that students make with this topic, which is multiplying the reciprocal of one fraction by the reciprocal of the other fraction, which also they can multiply the fractions without inverting. So this is the activity. So students will embark on the stupendous voyage to the treasure in Miss Correa's class. So we have to get to our treasure. Ahoy, students, let's go on the divisional journey and get our treasure. At each stop, the students will have to go and complete a division word problem, and they cannot continue throughout the voyage unless they have correctly solved each problem. So for stop number 1, the problem is if Miss Correa's phone battery life on the boat is down to 3/5 and continuously drains 1/6 every hour, how many hours will her battery last? So the first thing we're going to do, step number 1, is we're going to break it down first. That is the easiest thing to do. It allows us to not make any mistakes, and it also allows us to see if we did make a mistake in the end, we go back and look at each step carefully. So first you have to write out what your equation is. And your equation should be written out as 3/5 divided by 1/6. Moving on to step number 2, you have to invert first and then multiply. When we're talking about invert, we have to remember that that is multiplying by the reciprocal of the second fraction. As I said, when you invert then multiply, you should keep 3/5 the same, but you have to remember that you are switching 1/6 to its reciprocal, which in this case can either be 6 or 6/1 if that's easier to write down and keep track of each step. After doing so, you should then have a brand new equation where we are now multiplying 3/5 by 6/1. So your equation should now look like this: 3/5 times 6/1. So for moving on, once you finally get to step 3, you're going to multiply the fractions by one another. So you will have a new equation of 3/5 times either 6/1 or 6, whichever one works best for you. Then you multiply the two fractions by one another. So you should all get your quotient, which is the answer of 18/5. Or if you want to make this into a whole number, it will be 3 3/5. Now at this point, students will be able to move on to stop number 2, and this is an activity that really does build up kids' confidence when it does come to dividing fractions by fractions. So I feel like with this activity, they'll be able to clear the misconceptions, and students won't have to multiply the reciprocal of one fraction by the reciprocal of the other fraction, or multiplying the fractions without inverting, which will also lead them to producing the wrong quotient. So to conclude, I feel as though this activity is very beneficial for students as they will always be more engaged in physical activities. So with this activity, they're going to be forced to break down each problem, and they'll always have to invert and multiply within each problem so they can work their way to the treasure.